Okay, today we have David Croft, and he is a partner at Meyers Roman. We have Calvin Cooper, founder and CEO at Rhove. We have Evan Karnoupakis, who is executive consultant at Media Shower. And we have Natalie. Natalie, say your last name for me. I should have asked this.
Smolenski.
Smolenski. Okay.
Yes, you got it.
And we have Natalie Smolenski, Head of Business Development at Hyland Innovation. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us today. And maybe each one of you can give a little bit more of an introduction of yourselves. Maybe we go in the order in which I introduced you. So David, that would be, we start with you, sir.
Thanks, Scott. As Scott mentioned, I'm a partner at a law firm in Cleveland, Ohio. I focus primarily on tech things. I'm the chair of the blockchain and cryptocurrency group, the cybersecurity group. I actually got my start in this industry in 2011 when some business partners and I started a mining company, and have been involved since. So got in very early on and I've gotten to see how the industry's changed from a very ground floor perspective.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you, David. And Calvin, sir, in Columbus.
Yes, super excited to be with you today. I'm Calvin Cooper, co-founder and CEO of Rhove. And Rhove expands access and opportunity for everyone to invest in and own the places we live, work, and play. And what that means is a product, we're like Coinbase for real estate. So people can download an app and go from not invested to invested in real estate in less than a minute with as little as $1.
Nice. Now, real estate like beachfront properties in Aruba?
Yeah. Commercial real estate, multifamily, residential. So all over the place.
Love it. Okay, Evan, sir.
My name is Evan Karnoupakis. As Scott said, I'm an executive consultant for Media Shower with the focus on enterprise blockchain, government, and regulation. I've also co-authored a book called Blockchain Success Stories, Case Studies from the Leading Edge of Business, which is a collection of successful blockchain implementations across a variety of industries. I'm a contributor to the investor publication Bitcoin Market Journal. I serve as a board member for Avocado Technologies. I'm a frequent speaker, panelist, and judge at blockchain conferences, businesses, and universities. And I most recently led the development of the Massachusetts and Ohio editions of the Legislators Toolkit for Blockchain Technology in a collaborative effort with the Chamber of Digital Commerce. And I'll be speaking more about that later today.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, sir. And Natalie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Smolenski. I lead business development for Hyland Innovation. I came to Highland through the acquisition of a company I helped found called Learning Machine, which specialized in blockchain-anchored verifiable digital records. So I've been in the blockchain-based identity space for quite some time, since 2015, 2016, really seen the industry evolve. I'm now chairman of the board of the Texas Blockchain Council, which is a trade association in the state, and founder and executive director of the Texas Bitcoin Foundation, which is a 501c3 specializing in research and education about Bitcoin and related social and historical issues.
Awesome. Well, okay, so we have just a panel of experts in this space right now. And David, maybe we start with you. Can you give us a little bit of a picture of the landscape of blockchain in Ohio? I mean, we obviously have this panel. What else is happening in the state of Ohio that's on your radar?
Well, I guess I look at this, I'm always looking at it from a legal perspective.
Yeah.
So I would say I'd like to break this into two buckets. There's companies that are focused solely on blockchain, and that's basically their business premise. They're creating platforms, they're creating something that has to do with tokens, they're creating exchanges. The latest and greatest is the metaverse. So there are a lot of companies involved with that, using the NFT, the non-fungible tokens, which we can talk about a little bit later. And then there are companies that are using the technology kind of in the background. That's maybe not their primary business model. So like Hyland, for example. Hyland is a company that likely would be looking at all types of technology, AI, IoT. Blockchain is probably one of those things. Whereas Rhove is a company that is focused on, it's their primary technology is blockchain, using blockchain to invest in different real estate ventures. You've got other companies out there like SafeChain that Calvin was probably familiar with it. It's instant real estate transactions with blockchain. Champ Titles. There you've got Vodum, you've got Onum. There's all the different types of companies that are using blockchain as their primary business model. But you're also looking at other companies like KeyBank and the other financial institutions in the area. Sherwin-Williams. They're looking to implement blockchain in many different ways. Maybe from a financial standpoint, or a company like Sherwin-Williams might be using blockchain technology in logistics. Blockchain is very, very the focus very early on with blockchain. Once people stopped focusing so much on cryptocurrency, which is my passion, they started focusing on the different uses. Logistics and supply chain is one of the big areas where blockchain can make huge leaps and forward advances. And in today's day and age, with supply chain issues, we'll call them, I would think that companies are focusing on that more now than ever.
Yeah. Well, take us. I mean, having been involved in this since 2011, obviously that's a lot of experience in this space, right? Because you're getting close to the age of at least the cryptocurrencies functionality of all of this conversation, as I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong. But what shifts have you seen? I mean, you mentioned NFTs as something that's a little bit more kind of cutting edge. What other shifts, and it could be legal from a legal perspective, or just the landscape in Ohio? We've got companies using it as a centerpiece. We have organizations using it in the background. What else have you seen in Ohio in recent times?
Well, being involved early on in this industry, more so than any other industry I've taken part in, it's allowed me to kind of look at it, along the entire landscape and see where the major shifts, at least from my perspective, have occurred. So when I got started, we would go to conferences where there were 50 people in the room. And one of the panelists was the creator of Ethereum, who was talking about Color Coin, which was what Ethereum was before it was actually created. Andreas Antonopoulos was speaking to a group of 50 people. I mean, it was a very, very early stage of this. Bitcoin the white paper was released in 2008, and that was not a coincidence. There was a lot of things going on with financial institutions out there. And so I just use that to kind of set the table and say that at that point in time, at the very early stages, people were kind of like, this technology, this concept is going to change the entire world. And they were just focused on the big picture really at that time. Then around 2017, that was really when the ICO craze started. Certain actors wanted to get their tokens out there to the world. Other actors found a way to make a lot of money very quickly without selling equity. So that's where you start to see government agencies take more of a role. I'm talking about the SEC. More recently, well, I guess along the entire spectrum, we've seen focus on mining and how these transactions are validated. More recently, we've seen the rise of NFTs, so the non-fungible tokens, the digitization of intellectual property and transfer of value without using it as a currency or a security. And then I would say the most recent is the DOW. Although DOW was an early on concept, you just see a lot more adoption of the DOW, the decentralized autonomous organizations. Wyoming just recently created a DOW entity, although I would just call it a different form of a limited liability company, but that's for another panel. And the metaverse. So there's a lot of platforms out there. Thank you very much, Facebook. There is a metaverse. Everyone's got a metaverse now, and everyone's integrating these platforms with video games, with very much like a virtual reality, virtual life. So that's kind of my perspective from beginning to end. I know there's a ton going on in between, and I hear about different things every day from different clients all over the world.
Calvin, talk a little bit about your origin story here, sir. How did you combine this technology with a passion for real estate, financial services? It's the centerpiece of what Rhove is doing, blockchain technology. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we really started Rhove to solve a problem that I was experiencing. I made the mistake of calculating how much rent I spent in the past 10 years. And what we realize is that millennials have $0 in that real estate wealth. We live in the greatest country in the world. Our capitalist system has created so much abundance. There's abundant finance in the world. There's abundant resources in the universe. We have more than enough to take care of everybody and every future generation. But we face like financing challenges. And I like philosophy, so I'll go there. So John Stuart Mill wrote about capitalism and this like authoritarian centralized system that's being controlled by capitalists, transitioning naturally, spontaneously over time into a more cooperative system. And he talked about that about 150 years ago. And so we're in that moment now where people are starting to organize in more democratic ways within this capital market framework, which I think is going to be so powerful. It's going to unleash so much creativity in the world. And so when we thought about Rhove and how we would approach the market, it really was a use case first perspective. Rhove is an application layer platform and technology. We use a myriad of technologies. It's like if you download that today, it's a very Web 2.0 experience. We've filed with the SEC for qualification. So pending qualification, we'll be able to transact with non-accredited investors. It'll feel just like Robinhood for real estate. But we've started to integrate several Web3 solutions into our mobile app. And then we have a separate open source project, Toker, which stands for tokenized real estate, that we've started to develop recently. And that protocol is a protocol for financing real world assets. So Rhove will leverage the Toker protocol like we leverage many other technologies to achieve our goal. And so when you think about this, I think some folks in the audience may hear a lot of buzzwords. And I think David mentioned a lot of the hype in the market. And so people think, oh, is this just a way to raise money? Or crypto is just a scam and some people will think about blockchain technology as a glorified spreadsheet, but it's so much more than that. It's about how we organize. It's about organizing human systems democratically with people who we don't know. And that trust, which our whole world is built on trust. And so when you think about the world and the inefficiencies in our market, a lot of it boils down to a lack of trust, a shortcut for trust. And so when you think about the brilliant people who are graduating out of OSU and they're sending their resume out there, and you've got somebody who's sending their resume from Yale, a lot of people just take a mental shortcut for trust and they hire the Yale person, right? Or if you were in the venture ecosystem and people are like, oh, just raise a family friends round of capital. Not everybody grew up with family friends who could just write $100,000 checks when you have a deck and a dream, right? But the people who do, the reason why they'll write that to somebody they know and not some other person is trust. And so what inspires me about this technology and why I'm so passionate about not just applying technology to solve real world problems like what we're doing at Rhove, but why specifically go into the trenches and eat glass to adopt blockchain technology is because I think that by having a more decentralized system and way of working, decentralizing our organizations, decentralizing our financial markets, we're going to build a more democratic and open system that's more fair. And so that abundance in the world can reach more people. And that's what this is about. That's what's really exciting about blockchain technology.
Well, and speaking of kind of being in the trenches, right? You are in this day to day. I think you said eating glass, right? I mean, it's not easy work. What can Ohio be thinking about? What should we be doing to make this a more friendly ecosystem for companies like yours? I mean, what needs to be done and what needs to be prioritized so that we're attracting more organizations like Rhove to our state?
Yeah, I think the toolkit that the Chamber of Commerce put out there is really important, and to make it like tangible for legislators here. So when folks are forming DAOs, they need to form a legal entity to interact with the built world, we'll call it a LAO for this purpose. And the Toolkit protocol is making it easy for people to form DAOs on chain. And do so in a way that's custom built for DAOs that want to own real estate or DAOs that want to interact with the built world. So when they come off chain, they need a way to form an entity. And right now, the place we go is Wyoming. So you've got an Ohio-based company who's going to be sending a lot of business to Wyoming. And Ohio has a real opportunity to outcompete Wyoming because they don't have like the same streamlined process for LLC filings that we do. And so we could go a step further. Like not only could we adopt this DOW legislation that I think was recently introduced by Rep. Frazier and others. I think that's going to be really powerful. But we can also take it further and allow people to pay their filing fees with crypto and really streamline that process. And you would probably see entities from all over the world doing business here, not just paying filing fees and forming, but that's basically saying, hey, we want you to come here and innovate. We want you to run proofs of concept here. And heck, we already have a lot of talent and capital here. And so that puts a spotlight on our state. And so it's a lot more important than people think it is, this legislation.
Yeah, hey, Calvin, I've had quite a few clients that are both located in Ohio. Some are located outside of the country, outside of the state. Some are actually located in Wyoming. And I would say a lot of them, Wyoming has a lot of presence from a blockchain crypto standpoint, mainly because of social media and marketing. But I would say that a lot of my clients that have formed entities in Wyoming have found it to be kind of a pain.
It is.
You pointed that out, but in addition to what you're pointing out, there's not as much infrastructure in Wyoming to support what they're trying to do. And it's just been more of a hassle because not only are they organized in Wyoming, but they almost always, because of employment tax laws or whatever other reason, have to register as a foreign entity in the state in which they're primarily conducting business. So I think Ohio doing something like you suggested would be huge and super important.
Oh yeah, we just had that challenge ourselves. Like we formed a DAO, and then that DAO formed an LLC in Wyoming, and that LLC then formed an LLC in Ohio to acquire a plot of land that we're minting as an NFT, that if you were to exchange that on chain, you're also buying the land, just to demonstrate that you can do it and that you can collateralize it and borrow from it from a DeFi protocol. And so we could have done all that in Ohio, but
with one step.
But one step, yeah.
Okay, so Ohio. So let's get to Evan. We've got the Ohio legislators. Oh, go ahead. Oh, okay, Evan. I think I'm echoing in your sound. But Evan, the Ohio Legislators Toolkit for Blockchain, and I think you've been heavily involved in that work and trying to move some of this forward. Would you talk a little bit about that work and what you've learned kind of in the process? And then let's go to some other places. I know that you've been heavily involved in Massachusetts as well. What's happening in those states that we should be adopting here in Ohio?
So the purpose of the Ohio Legislators Toolkit is to provide Ohio legislators with education on blockchain technology and guidance on how to craft legislation that will create an optimal regulatory environment to foster innovation and competitiveness in the Buckeye State, so that Ohio can become a recognized leader in blockchain. Now, the background story here is that in April of last year, I saw Natalie had a post about Texas and how they had come out with the Texas-specific edition of the Legislators Toolkit from the Chamber of Digital Commerce. And this was of particular interest to me because we had covered the Chamber of Digital Commerce, which is the national trade association for the digital asset and blockchain industry, in our book, and specifically featured their Legislators Toolkit for Blockchain Technology, which came about because they were seeing that there was some very well-intentioned legislation written at the state level, but yet it was erring on key definitions and missing key blockchain legislative principles. So that is why they issued this as a free and open source resource for legislators to use. Texas did a great job of adapting this to their specific needs. So after I read this, I thought to myself, well, maybe the next two logical states to have their own specific editions would be Ohio and Massachusetts. They were both forward-thinking states. We had provided blockchain education through learning and discovery sessions to the state of Massachusetts, through the Massachusetts Technology Collaborative. Within Ohio, there was a very innovative project enabling people to pay their taxes with Bitcoin. We also had excellent participation from Ohio's leaders at the Blockland conference that we had at the end of 2019. So, and then of course at the federal level at this time, that the Texas edition came out, the two representatives that were kind of leading the way for blockchain were Warren Davidson of Ohio and Stephen Lynch of Massachusetts. And then personally, I'm a lifelong resident of Ohio, born and bred here, graduate of Miami University, judged the finals of the Blockland pitch competition, so very well connected not only to Ohio, but to the blockchain space here. But I also work for Boston-based Media Shower. And as a result of my co-author, John Hargrave, and one of our consulting partners, Eric Rhove, being co-founders of the Boston Blockchain Association, I've also become very active within that organization. So I reached out to Natalie, who ironically I had come to know because she was actually interviewed by us in our book because a learning machine was one of the case studies in our book, which then of course later became Blockchain Credentials, and she'd become the board chair of the Texas Blockchain Council. She hooked me up with Lee Bratcher, and we had a great conversation. He was very helpful in terms of giving us some of his best lessons learned. And so I decided from that point, he encouraged us, go ahead, do Massachusetts and Ohio. We're all working together on this. And we did Massachusetts first because you have the Boston Blockchain Association, which was already in place to serve as a hosting organization and to vet that. And while we were working on the Massachusetts version, that gave me time to assemble the Ohio Blockchain Advisory Council and also to connect with Ohio Acts as a hosting organization for this project. In terms of the actual toolkit, what it provides, it gives an overview of the transformative power of blockchain technology. Then it gives a history of innovation in the Buckeye State. It shows the potential impact of what blockchain can do, as well as the current state of our innovation economy. Then it goes into an overview of blockchain legislation with its focus on universal principles for legislators, such as focusing on the function instead of the technology. Then we go into kind of the current Ohio legal environment. We look at legislative concepts, current legislative proposals in other states, then blockchain legislation within the state of Ohio, and finally 5 recommendations that we have for Ohio lawmakers. But the end result of this is that you have 3 very different states with very different strengths working together with the National Trade Association to build out this blockchain ecosystem, because we're all making this pie bigger for everyone. This strengthens our technological competitiveness, not only within our respective states, but in the country as a whole. And then in terms of any lessons that we've learned from working with other states, I think one, understanding who your collaborative partner is. And in this case, it was the Chamber of Digital Commerce. And in addition to their state focus with the toolkit, they also have a national action plan for blockchain technology. And that has clearly been, clearly they had a big impact on the most recent federal blockchain action plan that President Biden recently announced. In terms of understanding your own state, looking at our own specific strengths and needs, but also balancing, what are our municipal and regional expertise, but then also expanding across the state as a whole. For example, in Texas, as I learned from picking Natalie's brain, Dallas is emerging as this blockchain hub, and of course, Austin is very well known as a technological hub. But yet, they make efforts to connect and collaborate with blockchain groups across the state. Massachusetts obviously has a strong Boston bias, and they have the Boston Blockchain Association, which was very critical to the work that we did. But yet, they explore the strengths and needs across the whole state, from the Berkshires to the Bay. And in Ohio, we wanted to make a point to leverage the knowledge that we gained from the Blockland experience, but we also wanted to bring in leaders across the state. It's good to know, within your state, who is active at the federal, state, and local levels. So as already mentioned, Warren Davidson is a U.S. rep pushing for blockchain legislation for our country. State reps like Rick Carfagna and Mark Frazier, who have already been previously mentioned today. Doug McCullough, who's a member of the Blockchain Advisory Council, in Dublin as a CIO. He put together a digital identity program called People, Points, and Polls, which has had some very interesting results there, from which we've all benefited. And then lastly, I would say, the lesson that we've tried to learn is to bring in people with a diversity of backgrounds and experiences beyond technology. This is increasing our reach and relevance by building awareness and community buy-in, and hopefully to increase the likelihood of adoption of the toolkit. That's why we brought in from academia, people like you, Scott, and Bob Sopko from Case Western. On the legal side, David Croft and Brian Ray, who I've known for almost 30 years. We brought in blockchain entrepreneurs like Shane McRand-Bigelow from Sham Titles and Jeffrey Stern from Actual. For diversity, equity, inclusion, and nonprofit social impact, we included another Ohio ex-member, Amy Newman. And last, in terms of a statewide technology leader, bring in Chris Berry. So those are some of the lessons that we have learned here.
Awesome. Natalie, I had lunch with Evan about a week ago right now, and we were talking, and he said your name, and he said she is incredibly brilliant. I love having conversations with her about blockchain. So we're going to turn to you. You're the head of the Texas Blockchain Association. That's the correct phrasing. Is that accurate?
Chairman of the board of the Texas Blockchain Council.
Council.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
So what are you seeing in other states? What's happening around the United States and in Texas that has you excited and kind of enthused about the landscape right now?
Well, this is a very rapidly evolving space. So one of the reasons we actually founded the Texas Blockchain Council is because in 2019, the Brookings Institution did a survey of U.S. states and kind of classified them as to how friendly or not they are to blockchain technology. And Texas was actually listed as reactionary. And so, Lee Bratcher and I kind of thought that was ridiculous, that there was a lot of, education that could be done that would quickly demonstrate the extent to which a self-sovereign peer-to-peer digital currency is in fact quite in line with Texas values. Yes. So we launched the council in 2020. That then quickly picked up steam. We got 4 pieces of legislation introduced in the legislative session in 2021. 2 of those were passed into law. And in the process, we basically built a community. So we started having these regular events and meetups. And then we had the Texas Blockchain Summit, the first annual event, which featured 3 sitting U.S. senators, Representative Warren Davidson, who I invited from Ohio, a number of industry thought leaders, the CEOs of at least 5 Bitcoin mining companies. And that was like a watershed event that, Texans, but also people from other states got to see that there is already a thriving, not just like social community, but economic system that's growing up around these technologies. And so, today, nobody even remembers, that Texas used to be quote unquote reactionary, because we've literally made good on our mission to make Texas a leader in blockchain innovation. And that has had a cascading effect. So states all over the country are introducing bills to legalize DAOs, to pay taxes in various forms of cryptocurrency, to create verifiable credentials initiatives statewide, to create trust frameworks for digital identity. All this kind of blockchain related or blockchain adjacent legislation is being introduced now. And so from my point of view, the most important thing is, for states to have their own coherent perspective. We are a federal system. And so states actually have a lot of power and leeway in how they choose to approach this jurisdictionally. But then we also need a concerted approach at the federal level. So I've been actively working with, organizations that do federal advocacy to ensure that there is an emerging American perspective on Bitcoin and blockchain technology. Because as we've seen, the geopolitical winds are shifting rapidly. We now live in an explicitly multipolar world with China, Russia, the European Union are these kind of imperial powers, imperial scale powers that have their own perspectives on digital technologies and digital money. And so I think now is a unique historical opportunity for both states and the United States to define who we are.
Wow. Well, and it's good to know that people like you are on the front lines trying to make that happen as well. Evan trying to make that happen. David, in his own way from the legal lens, and Calvin, of course, through Rhove, building these organizations. I can't even, Calvin, go through what you had to do to sell that parcel of land digitally, but it sounded complicated. Well, so talk a little bit, Natalie, about Hyland. What is Hyland doing specifically in the space of blockchain that's kind of exciting you right now?
Sure. Well, Hyland is a Gartner Magic Quadrant leader for over a decade now in a software segment called content services, which basically has to do with managing very large amounts of digital documents, videos, images, basically automating business processes across the enterprise at scale.
Yeah. And
the issues of fraud, of provenance verification for digital records, of tampering with digital documents, these are all, concerns across all the verticals that we sell into, whether it's healthcare, government, education, trade and logistics, or any other. And so from their point of view, it was kind of a no-brainer to acquire the industry-leading provider of verifiable credential solutions, because that could then be seamlessly folded into their broad portfolio of other content services offerings.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we kind of wind down these conversations, we oftentimes will ask some final questions of our guests. And I think what I'd love to do is have a little bit of and not necessarily a speed round, but a quick round. So for each one of you, what's your prediction for the future of blockchain technology? What do you think? Where is this headed? What are some possibilities that you see that excite you and kind of keep your mind cooking? David, why don't we start with you, sir?
Well, two things. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, I foresee more regulation. Right now, Natalie touched on this, we've got multiple federal agencies planting their flag in this industry. That creates confusion and uncertainty. It stifles, it alienates, it puts a huge blockade in front of innovation and business development. I've had a lot of clients talking about, well, what if I don't do business in the U.S.? What if I set up here and do business outside of the U.S. all the time? Because I don't know if I'm a security. I don't know if I have to comply with FinCEN. I don't know if I'm a commodity. According to them, I'm all of them. So who do I follow? Believe it or not, in 2014, we were jumping up and down with joy when the IRS decided that Bitcoin was property and to be taxed as property, because we had some sort of certainty there. Unfortunately, every other alphabet agency in the union has thrown their hat in the ring and said that they're going to govern that. So regulation is one. I guess I'm kind of on the fence about whether I'm excited or not. And the other thing I'm really excited about is believe it or not, the metaverse. Everything's metaverse nowadays, but I'm really excited about the virtual world. I think, you know, to Calvin's point where he was alluding to the blocks for millennials to gain wealth and develop business. You don't necessarily need you don't need bricks and mortar to create a world virtually. Mm-hmm. And I think that the metaverse, you know, that's just such an exciting thing. If anyone has read, and I would encourage you to read, if anyone still actually reads paper books, Ready Player One. Yep. I always think of that when people talk about the metaverse, and although that world is a little bit darker than what I'm foreseeing, it's still kind of very interesting. So I'm excited about the metaverse. I hope it does some exciting things. I think it will.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Calvin.
Yeah, and so a wonderful book, terrible movie though. But funny that it was set in Columbus, right?
It was, yeah. The film,
pretty inspiring. But yeah, my prediction for this space is that in 10 years, DAOs will be the largest owners of real estate in the world, powered by DeFi. And I think that's going to be a good thing, because what is a DAO but like a digital co-op? And if you think about it's just so, as David mentioned, there's all this regulation coming, but we really need a paradigm shift. We shouldn't start with, we need to regulate it because it's new. Like 10 years ago, we were pissed off at the banks for putting the squeeze on Americans. And we were like, we need something better that works for us. And then something better comes along. We're like, we got to stop this. We got to protect the banks. It's crazy, right? And if you think about what that means for us and how we live our lives, like as real citizens, I hope that over the next 10 years, when DAOs on real estate, when we start interacting with the built world, that it connects the power of blockchain technology to people and their actual lives and how we live. And so how do our cities get built today? There's all this friction between developers and property owners, buying land, and then the local community trying to resist. And they're like, oh, don't gentrify. And so you've got this misalignment of incentives, misalignment of value, and you've got this misalignment of like interest. And so what you can do is when you have a more cooperative model, when the largest financiers of real estate aren't banks who don't value they don't value things that don't fit nicely into a spreadsheet, but we do as consumers. And so when you get financiers that are us, the people, the co-ops, and when you have the people involved in the process in a way that aligns with developers in the future, I think we're going to start to see so much more. Like, we're going to solve problems like homelessness and this housing crisis. We're going to make housing more affordable for the middle class. We are going to own more of our cities, so we don't have to look out the window and see cranes go up and say, man, I wish I could invest and own a piece of this city, but it feels so out of reach. And when people dig in and see the technology that's empowered these solutions, I really hope that we have a paradigm shift and start to think about regulation in a different way.
Awesome. Wonderful. Evan, sir.
Well, if we think of the internet that we've come to know for the last 25 years as an internet of information, I really see blockchain as an internet of value, or a platform for sharing things of value. And my prediction, which is actually I first heard as a quote from Leanne Kemp, the founder of Everledger, which has a blockchain-based supply solution, is that within about 5 to 10 years, I would say that no one's going to be talking about blockchain. And the reason is that today, no one talks about email or browsers or HTTP or SMTP. That's just an accepted part of our technological infrastructure. And I think it's going to become the same way with distributed ledger technologies and smart contracts and consensus algorithms. And when that happens, what we're going to see is that blockchain is going to be this platform that's going to be connecting all other emerging technologies. You're going to have AI making smart contracts smarter. You're going to have an increased level of stability and security for IoT and 3D printing in a post-quantum world. you are going to see increased efficiencies with biometrics and fintech. And again, all these are going to come together to create what I learned from Scott is exonomic growth, the science of exponential change.
Yep. Convergence, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's another way of saying some of that. Natalie.
So we're in an age of rapid technological progress, and that also always brings with it notable challenges. So, a few years ago, a scholar named Shoshana Zuboff wrote a book called Surveillance Capitalism to talk about how there's kind of a nexus between state and private industry to modify human behavior at scale, to either drive profit or, for social control. So she kind of identified this incipient trend. That trend is accelerating. So we're basically now in an age of mass surveillance, and the space for individual people to exist outside of that surveillance is narrowing. That is not, as a macro process, that's not something we can stop short of like massive civilizational collapse. Like as our society continues to advance, intelligent automation, which is kind of at the intersection of artificial intelligence and automation technologies, will become ever more sophisticated and drive greater and greater aspects of our daily lives. And so from my point of view, the most important social political imperative right now is preserving what a couple of MIT historians have referred to as the narrow corridor of liberty, which is the space in which human freedom flourishes in the contest between state and society. And blockchain technology has a role to play in this, especially through the Bitcoin protocol, as a truly censorship-resistant, peer-to-peer ledger for transacting directly in digital money as a bearer asset, not as an account-based asset. It preserves this sphere of individual liberty in the digital space. It's contested. So governments around the world have, banned it. Many are attempting to ban it. But its survival, I think, is critical for the preservation of anything like a democratic project in the 21st century. And so whether that's on the money side or the digital identity side, these are the types of things that I advocate for, both from an industry solution standpoint, in the sense that, we're baking self-sovereign architectures into applications that we sell, a SaaS product, so that they're just part of the stack and nobody really has to think about them, but that liberty gets baked in. That also needs to be a policy priority, both at the state and the federal level. And so that's what I work on from a policy standpoint.
Okay. Well, we are winding our time down, and now we are in the speed round. And this final question is, we're going to lighten it back up to kind of, ground level here. A favorite place in Ohio? David Croft, favorite place to be in Ohio?
I would say my top three are in order: my house, my hometown of Hartville, and then Hocking Hills.
Okay. Calvin, sir.
Short North Columbus. It's got everything you need to succeed. Good food, investors, talent, friends. Like, I stick to my little bubble here. But
I like it. Short North Columbus. Awesome. Everything you need to succeed. Do you have that on a t-shirt yet?
No.
Evan.
The Ledges Trail in Virginia Kendall, which is part of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. It's a place I always enjoyed hiking. It's great to go in the summertime because when it's really hot, it's nice and cool there, in the caves and on the ledges. And I really enjoy taking my kids to hike there now.
Awesome. Awesome. Natalie.
You know, I'm going to say the mothership, Westlake.
Good
Love
answer.
it up there.
Good answer. And if I can choose, I will be at Progressive Field with a beer in my hand and my son at my side, and we'll be watching a little baseball. It's about 65 degrees, and it's Sunday afternoon. So I have to say that's one of my favorites, watching the Guardians. Everybody, thank you so much. Be well. This has been a conversation all about emerging tech, blockchain. Thanks so much for being with us today. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us.